I was happy. You sigh a lot. Like, you sigh like out of like, oh, this is great. Or like, it's taking forever. I was like, I think I want it for my dog. Because like, it's like, we don't have to speak, but I want you to know how I feel. Subtly, but he obviously just had it every time. It's like, yeah, exactly. Because you can work this, you can speak. Oh, she's 11 months. She's already convinced you're ready to do. Yeah, just because she's got that like cattle dog in her. What's the I don't think she's more of a dad when I'm traveling, so I think like for him, he would run like 10 kilometers with him. I ran 5 with him yesterday. Yeah. And that was fine up to 50k. And then I have done one 10k run there, and that's because we got completely lost. So way longer than we both wanted. And she would just lie down the grass and was like for a while. But yeah, so she's done 10k, but I think she's also got, we thought she was Calvi. Yeah. But she's Rottweiler. Oh, okay. Yeah, that tan colour. We're like, oh, Calvi, cattle dog, like we're going to be able to run. But she's like 5k and like she's got the ruddy enough. And
I'm stopping for lunch after.
yeah, she's got more worry than a ruddy, but she's still got the cattle dog and she's got Labrador. So she's got like the Labrador, she can eat everything and things except for the other. And she's got the Rottweiler that takes the heat and just wants to sit down. And she's like, 5k. So yeah, she's interesting. We're learning about her more. I'm gonna get ready to sing. Look presentable. Rotate. That was delicious. I forgot the grapefruit stuff. The dressing. Did you have any olive oil? So I had a little bit of olive oil.
Okay. Is that working? Yeah. Okay. Hi everyone. I'm Paige. We're gonna get started on our next session, which is work in process, about embracing a holistic approach to training, looking at the unique differences that affect women during training, recovery and racing, and focusing on taking a holistic approach that caters to the mind, body and soul. So today I've got Lydia O'Donnell and Lucy Bartholomew joining me. Lucy's actually here. So I'll just give a quick intro to both of them. So Lucy has a familiar face in the Australian trail running scene, having competed in events such as Western States, Ultra Trail Cape Town, Ultra Trail Australia, and just this weekend took out the 50k at Wolverton Trail Fest, which I was lucky enough to watch her do. More recently, Lucy can be found cooking up a storm, finding sticks with her dog Tani, swimming laps at the local pool and clocking up the kilometres in Melbourne's northeastern suburbs. Lucy is a true inspiration to many women in the trail running community for her positive and welcoming outlook on life. And we're stoked to have us with her tonight.
Thanks, Paige.
Lydia O'Donnell is also here with us. Lydia is a force to be reckoned with on the track, having represented New Zealand in cross-country, half-marathon and marathon distance events, having spent many years travelling the world competing now resides in Melbourne. Working regularly with iconic brands such as Nike and Tempo Journal, Lydia is now focusing her years of experience within the sport to focus on training, having recently launched Femico, her own female-focused training platform.
Just ask her to.
Yeah. Lydia, are you there?
I am here. Hello,
Cool.
everybody. I'm just trying to put the video on. I think I need permission your end to put the video on.
Oh, okay. Let me see if I can figure out how to do that.
Maybe.
I don't know how.
Hit 3 button with 3 blue dots in attendees to make co-host. No, she's a co-host.
Gotcha.
Dun, 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 dun.
Yeah.
Got it.
Here we go. Hello, everybody. How are we?
Hi. Good.
Good. Thank you for that intro. That was yeah, very nice. Nice welcome.
Okay, so we might get started. So the first question, I guess we'll start with you, Lydia, with the work you've been doing with Femico. What response have you seen to really nailing in on female-specific training and cycle observation in regard to sort of achieving training outcomes and like how your athletes have benefited from that different approach?
Yeah, awesome. So I started Femico at about September, October last year. So we've been going for about 5 months now. But I actually started training to Femico philosophies probably about a year and a half ago, when I really started paying a lot more attention to my cycle and adapting my training around it. And so I did an online course with Dr. Stacey Sims, who I'm sure many of you are familiar with, and really learned around her philosophies and how we really needed to understand our physiology to be able to not only train better, but recover better and adapt our nutrition around our menstrual cycle as well. So that was over a year ago now. And once we kind of kicked off Femi, we had numerous athletes come on board, some girls who had natural menstrual cycles, some girls who didn't have a menstrual cycle, and some girls who are on contraception. So quite a wide range of different physiologies and obviously hormones that are fluctuating throughout their cycles. So everyone that has kind of come on board with us has, I would say, got something quite different out of it. A couple of athletes who came into Femico without a cycle have been working really closely with our coaches, as well as a lady called Sarah from Your Monthly, who really helps females get their cycles back if they've lost them. And so those girls obviously probably had the most amazing gains because they've actually been able to get a natural cycle back, which, you know, for all of us females, having a natural cycle is the most amazing tool to allow us to know that we are healthy or not. So, I mean, there's so many things around the menstrual cycle, but historically, our periods and menstrual cycles have been quite taboo and probably something that a lot of us, especially athletes, haven't really wanted to talk about or even focus on at all. And so, or probably something that we've almost like hated in a way. So now that we've kind of changed the mentality around that and the way that we speak about our menstrual cycle and how we can use it as like this ergogenic aid, it's allowed our athletes to really embrace their physiologies a lot more. So being able to kind of see those girls go through that journey of maybe not appreciating their body for what it can do, working against their cycle, working against their physiology, restricting their food intake and trying to they really believe that by doing that, they're going to enhance their performance. We've kind of flipped that mindset and that they need to be able to fuel their bodies to be able to have a natural cycle, and that's actually going to benefit their performance a lot more than starving themselves. So it's been an incredible journey so far, and we've got, I think, quite a long way to go, but I think just seeing those benefits from those girls is exactly why I do it.
I think like I've been in this sport only for about 2 years now, so since I finished school. It's been really interesting coming in at this time when a lot of professional athletes are sort of opening up about their stories and talking about how common these issues are in professional running especially, but even just like for beginner athletes that have no idea what to expect. I don't know if you've had any interesting experiences on that side of things.
Yeah, I think it's like there's definitely a difference between like ultra running and trail running to road and track. Like I can't speak to those sports. And Lydia, that's where you seem to cross section really well. And I think like that video that you put out just today with for International Women's Day and Femi was just like said in such few words what I think a lot of people are struggling with, which is incredible. So I think it's becoming more and more common to talk about, but I think there, like you say, there's still such a long way to go.
And since you've started Femico and really working with women, what are some of the most common misconceptions or like perceived barriers when it comes to training for long distance running events like marathons? Like what's the most common things that are like stopping people from just jumping in, giving it a go?
Yeah, I think this probably ties quite nicely into what we were just speaking around, but it's definitely for females, it's that idea that they have to look a certain way to be a marathoner. And I'm sure it's very similar in the ultra marathoning world. And even when you look at shorter distances, actually any sport, girls feel like they need to look a certain way to be able to be competitive in that sport. And actually a recent study that they did over in New Zealand showed that 3/4 of girls that are elite sportswomen feel like they have a pressure on them to look a certain way. And that's just like heartbreaking because we are all such different females. We're all such different people. We all have, positives and negatives in our sport. There's things that we need to work on, and then we've got really big strengths. And so you can't compare yourself to what other people look like. And I mean, even myself growing up, I was constantly comparing myself to other athletes, and I always thought I looked bigger than them and always thought I needed to lean up or lose weight or look a certain way or be taller even. Like there were things that I just wish that I had that I didn't have that I thought would make me a better athlete. And now I know like how important just tapping into your own physiology is and understanding and believing in yourself and what your body can do. That is just so much more powerful than trying to look a certain way. So as a marathoner, there's even with Femi, I have a few athletes that they've been told by men actually, and I had one instance, it was a male personal trainer. She was told that she could never run a marathon because she didn't look like a marathoner. And that to me is just like heartbreaking because you can imagine how many women actually listen to that, and especially coming from a professional, how that would really just mess with your head and steer you away from the sport. So if everybody and anybody could run a marathon, you don't have to look a certain way, and you don't even have to look a certain way to be a certain speed. I mean, I look at the elite marathoners all around the world and they look completely different. And so you just have to embrace you. And the biggest thing in elite running is, well, any running is just believing in yourself, and it's up here, not what's in the body.
Yeah, I think like I love going from, because I've been doing mostly trail stuff, dabbling in a little bit of track and road stuff recently in the last 6 months. And it's really interesting going from the track sort of atmosphere and in the competition realm, and then switching back to trail, and just how totally different it is, and the people you see crossing the finish lines. It's like, it just goes to show that like it doesn't really matter what body you're in, it will perform if you treat it well. It's really cool. Okay, Lucy, got a couple of questions for you.
All right, Paige.
Since you've been immersed in the endurance and trail running space for most of your life now, well, most of your conscious life that you can remember, and like we're watching the running and trail running world evolve dramatically constantly. Do you think the approach to training has become more or less holistic, or has it sort of gone through different phases as you've experienced?
Yeah, great question, Paige. As we sat and wrote that this afternoon. I think it's been interesting. I think that I found that it's kind of moved further away from holistic. I've kind of found, this is for myself and kind of watching the world of trail running, which, you know, there's just more and more races and more expectation that you kind of just over race and do more and more. You know, it's kind of expected in the trail. And especially in the ultra running world, it's kind of like the more you do, the stronger and more powerful you are. And so it kind of steers away from that holisticness, because you're no longer being intuitive and having that rest and that down period. And instead you're just kind of like finishing a race, taking a day to recover, and then everyone's asking what's next. And it doesn't feel as holistic, and just doesn't seem sustainable. And I got swept up into that for sure, you know. So I kind of think that it ebbs and flows. I think people are starting to see that, you know, even the top people go through these moments of overtraining or of burnout, or just like mental fatigue more than or injuries if it gets that bad. But yeah, I think that the sport I think it's growing exponentially, and the holistic stuff is quite kind of not caught up yet. And I think it's going to take just like a few big people in the sport to break and to be open about it and talk about it and vulnerable, for people to go, I don't want that to be my story. I'm going to learn from that person, and I'm going to like move forward with caution and respect for what these distances are. Because it kind of seems like people now just run a marathon and are kind of like, meh, you know, like, cool. And it's kind of like, no, dude, like, just sit in that. Like, just go tell the average Joe walking down the street that you ran 42.2 kilometers, and they will say, I wouldn't drive that far, or I wouldn't never do that. Like, better you than me. So you just gotta, like, we're in this bubble of runners, and that's cool and everything, but you gotta step outside and get some perspective. And that's where the holistic comes back, when you're like, yeah, I'm just going to be proud that I ran, like I did the 50K at Warburton. And I'm just like, I'm so happy to sit back and be like, job done for a little bit.
And you sort of touched on it a little bit, getting swept up in that movement, but is there any like mistakes that you can sort of pinpoint that you made along the way, or things you do differently that might have changed your opinion?
Many mistakes. I would say that, yeah, you know, I look back on my career and there's so many things that like coulda, woulda, shoulda changed, or could have done differently, but I wouldn't change. I think, you know, I'm really proud of my story and the things that I've done. And I think that, you know, I don't know what you mean by like changed your opinion, but like, I think it's changed my perspective. It's given me like, me having these experiences of learnings, I wouldn't call them failures, but I would call them, yeah, like learnings and experiences, has just meant that I can then like meet people like Paige and be like, here's what I did that didn't work. And, you know, you can kind of help write other, you know, to help other people's stories to be a little different. And people can take your knowledge and go and learn their own way. But yeah, I kind of feel like I wouldn't change anything that I did in my mistakes, if you want to call them that. But I'm kind of like, I harness what I did, and I'm happy to share that story to help others.
Yeah, and like from my perspective, I find that sort of thing, what you're both doing, super helpful, especially in the trail world. Like, I'm 21 now, and most of the women who are sort of the big names in the sport at the moment are, you know, close to or more than a decade older than me. And so that's like an extra 10 years of running in their legs that I don't have. And it's sort of hard to look at them and say, well, that's what I wanted to be doing. But like, what were they doing when they were my age? Like I can't go and run 100 Ks tomorrow. Like I probably could, but it wouldn't be very good for me, and I might not do another one for another few years. So it's cool to like listen to you guys reflecting back on what you've done and sort of try and translate that into what I'm doing. But yeah.
Well, I think the biggest thing is like your why and why you do these things, you know, like I kind of, you know, when I ran 100 Ks at 15, I wasn't doing it to be like young and the first to do it or anything like that. I was doing it because I wanted to spend time with my dad, and the numbers meant nothing. And going back to your first question about the holistic approach, is that it's become less holistic the more we've tracked it with numbers and Strava and the comparison and the Instagram, the need to constantly like get kudos and likes. And that's how that's how we kind of like define ourselves, is by like those numbers. And that's not holistic at all. And so I think that that's kind of like a really important thing, is that like, you don't even like, you could run 100K tomorrow, you know, you probably could and shouldn't, but you know, like having that belief that you could is a good thing, but then having that kind of like sustainable approach is a better thing. And I think that it's kind of important to balance those two. And that's what like having someone like Lydia for females is just like this incredible resource, which brings that holistic pillar up a bit, and it can meet the demand of the sport, because right now it's so unbalanced. But with people like Lydia putting it out there and sharing it and educating and coaching and just kind of like being someone that people can come to for advice, the holisticness comes up, because tracking your cycle and working off that is the most holistic thing and intuitive thing you can do.
Yeah, and I think like as you've been talking about getting less holistic and more focused towards numbers, I think it's been easy to forget that we are still human beings and that our bodies are all different, and our bodies aren't machines. Like they change, they go up and down. And I think that movement towards a more holistic approach has a long way to go, but I think it's really cool to see what Lydia is doing and reminding us that we aren't machines, and the numbers on Strava are not a reflection of what we're going to do. So it's easy to get sort of swept up in, you know, what you're saying about what's next, what's the next race, like what's the next goal am I working towards? And we can do that in any aspect of life, not just running, like in terms of jobs and kids and whatnot. But with COVID, we've sort of all of a sudden had no races. And so it has challenged some people's whys, and it's reinforced some and completely made others have no idea what they're doing or why they're doing it. So for both of you, do you think it's changed how you train, and if it's sort of emphasized a holistic approach, or like made you really sort of stop in your tracks and reassess? You go.
It's been a crazy and interesting year, I think, obviously for everybody, but for runners in particular. I guess before 2020, I knew I ran because I loved it, and I knew that my priority as a runner was to be enjoying myself, and that's what I try to push on all my athletes. But I probably didn't realize how much races and events motivated me. I'm like such a people person, and I love training with people, and I love going to events and traveling. And so with that being stripped away last year, it did make training a little difficult. And as a coach, I'm always coaching people towards specific goals, you know, and without having these specific event goals in mind, it did make training a little bit harder. At the start of last year, before COVID hit, I had qualified for the World Championship half marathon champs. And so that was something that I was really looking forward to doing last year. And then that, as soon as kind of COVID hit, that got canned at the start of the year. And that was probably just a bit of a, what do you want to call it? Like the start to many mental health struggles for me. I think it was definitely one thing that I really was looking forward to, was traveling and representing New Zealand. And with that being pulled away, and then race after race just getting stripped away, I did go to a place in my mind where I was probably lacking motivation a lot and lacking purpose, because I have been a runner my entire life. And as a runner, we're always chasing goals and what's next. So without that being there, I definitely kept the training going, because without running, I'd probably go quite crazy. But not having those specific goals definitely produced some mental battles for me throughout the year. And with my athletes, it was very similar. I think there's definitely some pros that came out of COVID, especially in 2020 with the upsurge of runners, how many people were taking up the sport because they had nothing else to do. And perhaps, those teenage girls that are used to, or girls that are used to just going to the gym and doing HIIT classes and stuff and not being able to do that and started running, it probably gave them a better view and a better idea of having a very balanced training. We all know that high intensity training is probably the latest, or has been for the last few years, the biggest craze in training for girls. And it is very purely a social media craze. It is just about the girls promoting high intensity sessions. And we all know high intensity session makes us feel so good when you walk out of the gym and you've shot your heart rate as high as it can possibly go. And so I understand why these girls would be enjoying doing high intensity every day, but they don't understand what that actually can do to their physiology and to their hormones. So I think stepping out of the gym for a bit and getting girls, especially girls, I mean, I just talk to girls, but boys as well, getting them in a routine of actually running, which is, that's part of why I love running, because the programming to be a good runner is actually so well balanced when you think about any other sport. We do have easy days, we do have hard days. Whereas if you look at any other sport, pretty much boxing is probably a very good example. You're working at a high intensity every single day, and that's just really bad for female bodies especially. So yeah, getting a lot more people into running last year was definitely a highlight. But without the races, it personally was a struggle for me. So it's nice to kind of have a few things back on the cards.
But you did run around a car park in a hotel and you represented New Zealand there, and I would say we're claiming you in Australia. We're very proud.
Yeah, that was probably the biggest mental struggle, was getting around that car park, and it was
Yeah. What about you, Lucy? Do you think it changed much in your numbers versus holistic approach towards training?
Oh, definitely, because I suddenly lost control of my numbers. We were told we were allowed an hour of exercise, 5-kilometer radius. So the numbers became, not in my control. And that was kind of, a blessing in disguise for me. I felt like it was just like, all right, Lucy, you have an hour to play every day. And it was like, it was always the highlight of my day, that and my one trip to the grocery store. But it was kind of like, make that hour shine. And like it wasn't like I did every hour as hard as I could. Sometimes it was an hour of just appreciating not having to wear a mask, or like looking someone in the eye, and like the brief conversation you'd have as you pass someone. And then it was an hour of, if I was doing something a bit more high intensity and a little bit more faster running, it was just unique. I hadn't been doing that. I'd been training for 100 miles for 3 years now. And it was just like, gosh, I have so many hours free in the day now. It was like, what do I do? I could have done a whole lot more, but I baked a lot of banana bread in the end. So yeah, I think for me, I've spoken about this a lot on my social media, is that in 2018, I outran my love of running. And like Lydia said, that running for joy kind of definitely started to disappear, and running for expectation, and kind of, because that was what I was taught, that was who I was. I was Lucy, the Solomon runner. And, when you take that away, and you take it away from a lot of people in lockdown, it was kind of like finding yourself away from your athletic pursuits, which at the end of the day is far, far more valuable than, any split that you'll ever put on Strava. So I think for me, it was just like getting back to, using that hour and just having fun, doing what my body felt like, what my mind felt like. And then kind of taking that out of it when lockdown ended, I was like suddenly like nervous. I was like, oh, I can run for as long as I like. Do I want to go long? And, I kind of just found that my runs still stayed local, still stayed around the hour. And I was just like, this is enough. I'm enough at this. I'm enough at an hour. I'm enough, if I didn't run it all tomorrow. And I think that was something that, I've kind of taken forward, is that, yeah, the numbers don't define me, nor should they define anyone. And after racing on the weekend, you know, if you race with joy and you race with like loving running, that's the best running you'll do. So that's kind of what I learned and what I hope to hold on to and to share with others.
Cool. Also, if anyone has any questions, you can chuck them in the chat box as well, and we'll try and get to them. So we want to advocate for sort of a women supporting women approach across all aspects of our lives, whether that's track, whether that's running or in the workplace. What have your experiences been with, if you've had felt any forced competition between elite women in track and in ultra running? Has that affected either of you?
I think, to be honest, I think the competitive side of things is definitely something I took a lot more seriously when I was younger. And I think girls coming together, whether it is myself getting older or just the age that we're living in, and females are generally starting to support each other a lot more. I feel like when I turn up to races now, girls are definitely there to support one another, and rather than kind of being on the start line and competing, of course we're competing against each other, we're more there to compete against ourselves, and we're actually there to support each other as well. So I see it a lot more often now that girls are lining up and having conversations about what paces they want to run, and encouraging each other to run specific splits or specific times. And I think that is just such a powerful thing. And I think when you think about kind of like the systemic issues and the history of women and how we kind of have been brought up to fight against each other or compete against each other and compare each other, that inequality between female and males is so evident in sport, but I feel like it is definitely changing over time. I feel like girls are becoming a lot more bonded and realizing that if we do work together, it's just going to be better, so much better for our entire gender versus us competing as well as trying to compete against men in sport as well. So yeah, it's an interesting one. And I think only recently I've really started to notice that support on start lines, which, yeah, it's super powerful. And I think it just gives athletes so much more confidence when they know that their competitors aren't necessarily there to, you know, better them, but work with each other to become better as an entirety. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. I've just started training I've been with Run Crew up in Sydney for about a year now, and I've just sort of started going to some of the track sessions and training with some of the women. And yeah, I've never experienced anything like the support that they have for each other. And I can't get there every week because I live about an hour south of Sydney, but when I have been there and there's been a good bunch of girls, it's like nothing else. So
yeah, it's awesome.
What about you, Lucy? What have you experienced with competitiveness in the trail running world?
Yes. I would say I think Lydia sums it up really nicely and politely. Very carefully chose words. But I think, it's a space that needs work. I think I can only speak from my experience, but I think that the Australian female running community at the elite level, if we want to call it that, from the ultra running side of things, I think in a sport that is like, you spend so long out on the track together and so much time like battling, like if you can't battle for 100 miles, it's just too long. That I think that we can definitely, I think there could be a shift towards going together. You can go fast alone, but you'll go further together. And I think that's kind of something that I myself are really wanting to focus on for this year, is kind of like working with people, like me and Liz have been on Zoom calls recently. I'm staying with Paige. I'm like, I kind of just want to understand like all the different people in the sport and like how we can like band together. And I think that like for Wild Places having this, we shouldn't need an International Women's Day to bring together like strong women from all different kind of areas and, with different, like kind of visions for the sport to come together and have a conversation and to speak openly about it. I kind of feel like, we shouldn't need that. We should just be able to do it. But yeah, I think that I think it's a beautiful thing to watch everyone work together. And I do think that, the way that Lydia brings women together for Femi, the way that Paige brings people together with her trail traction, and, everyone's doing these little things, and it's just kind of like creating awareness about that. And I think that, maybe on racing and stuff like that, there probably a greater shift could happen, but I think outside of that, the biggest shift is already started, and it's just like keeping that snowball effect to create something really, really special, and something that like leaves a legacy in the sport moving forward.
Yeah. We've got a question here from Bella. It's for Lydia, and she was wondering if you could quickly speak on how contraception versus natural cycle affects her runners. It's a huge topic, but isn't always openly spoken about, and it's super important.
It is. It is a big topic, but we can just touch on kind of the basis of it. What I just would want to say first is I don't ever at all tell someone that they shouldn't go on contraception. It's obviously a very personal thing, and people go on it for different reasons. Some women have issues where they need to be on contraception, and that's really unfortunate. I think, with women that are suffering those issues, it's really unfortunate for them. But in terms of just like the general gist, so obviously when you are having a natural cycle, your hormones are fluctuating. So we go through two kind of main phases throughout our cycle. The first phase is what we call the follicular phase, and it's a low hormone phase. And then you get to it, and that goes from about days 1 to 14. But from about day 10 to 14 is when we go through the ovulation phase. At this point, our estrogen is peaking and then dropping off. And then we go into what we call our luteal phase, which is a high hormone phase. And at this point, estrogen and progesterone are rising. So this is where our progesterone kind of like shoots through the roof, and then drops off at around 27 to 28 days on kind of your like textbook menstrual cycle. Every woman is different, but kind of that textbook length of a menstrual cycle is 28 days. So the first 2 weeks is a low hormone phase, and the last 2 weeks is a high hormone phase. And so throughout those phases, you can really adapt your training depending on where your hormones are at. When you're in a lower hormone phase, you can actually train a little harder. You can reach your VO2 a lot easier. You can access carbs a lot easier, and you can recover a lot faster. So those are kind of the phases where we really focus on pushing the intensity in training. And then the last 2 weeks of the cycle is where we kind of pull the intensity back, and we look at more of the endurance, form and function work. So it's more around maybe they're doing longer tempo sessions in those last 2 weeks, and maybe some more interval or fartlek sessions in the first 2 weeks. So that's a very like top line approach to how we work with the menstrual cycle with our athletes at Femi. And then you bring contraception into it. So depending on what sort of contraception you're looking at, if it is an OCP and you're pumping synthetic hormones into your body to be able to manipulate your cycle, this is really affecting your natural hormones. So it's affecting your natural cycle. So those hormone fluctuations that I just spoke through won't be happening when you are on oral contraception. Whereas if you have an IUD, you do still have those hormone fluctuations. So how the IUD works is it's inserted into the uterus, and it creates quite a thick mucus in your uterus. So you actually can't hold an egg. So the egg dies as soon as it gets in there. So you're actually still getting that. You're still ovulating. You're still getting your period, but you can't actually host a baby. So you still will be able to train to those phases if you have an IUD. Whereas having an oral contraception with synthetic hormones, you can't really train to those phases. And so like I said, I don't want to tell anybody not to be on contraception. Everyone's on it for different reasons, but ideally, to be able to get the benefits of training to your physiology, you should have a natural cycle, or if you do need contraception, the IUD is probably the best way to approach it. So yeah, it's a very, like we said, big topic, but hopefully that kind of answers the very top line approach to how you kind of look at that contraception versus a natural cycle.
Yeah, cool. Thank you. That's a pretty good way to sum it up. I know it's a very big topic. And we could be here all night talking about that one.
Yeah.
Sometimes when we're training, or when we've got a specific event we're focusing really hard on, there can be sort of this perception that in order to be able to, make the absolute most of that training and put everything into this event that some other things in our life have to give way and drop off. Have either of you sort of experienced this sort of lost your balance a little bit, or sort of found it hard to figure out how to tread in a better way? And is there any parts of your life in particular that you notice drop off first? Do you want-
Yeah, so about I lose time, but I think it was about 4 or 5 years ago. I was working full time and I was coaching, and I was also training for a marathon. And I got to a point where my life was extremely stressful. I had a lot of pressure on me at my job, and I really just didn't have any downtime. I was working for a global company, so even at night we're working, checking phones, replying to emails. But at the time I wanted to be Wonder Woman. Like, I thought that's what women needed to do to be successful, was to be super busy all the time, rushing from here and there and kind of do everything for anybody when they needed it. And so I probably lived in that sort of state for at least 2 or 3 years, where I was rushing around everywhere. And we all know when we're under stress, our cortisol just shoots through the roof. And if you are under so much stress and you never allow your body to recover, you actually stop producing natural cortisol, and that's when you can go into a state of fatigue. And so I actually fell into like quite a, I wouldn't say severe, but I fell into chronic fatigue. And I was pretty sick for at least 6 months before I actually realized it. I was suffering a lot of symptoms. I'd lost my menstrual cycle. I had some pretty irregular bowel movements, which was unpleasant. I had terrible skin. My hair was falling out, and I had this twitching eye, which just wouldn't go away for 6 months. So you'd think, you'd probably question if something was wrong, but I was trying to be that Wonder Woman I thought I was. Until one day I just woke up and looked in the mirror and realized how sick looking I was. And I went to work that day and quit my job. And I think it took me about 3 months to kind of start feeling normal, but it took me about 2 years to kind of get back to being a fully competitive athlete again. And so at that point, I learned a lot about holistic training and about prioritization, like what is my focus. And when you are teetering on the edge like that, of course, your health is the most important thing. Running is great and running makes me happy, but if it means that running is making my health suffer, then I'm 100% pulling back on running. At the time, obviously, I was working quite hard as well, and having a great job is a great thing. But making a lot of money and having a specific job title is definitely not the version of success that I wanted to see in myself. Like, my success was being healthy and happy within who I was, and I don't think I was either of those things at that time. So it made me realize, like, what is it that makes me happy? And of course, feeling healthy is one of the big ones. And prioritizing what was important to me, and that was, friends and family, and being able to get out the door and just go for a jog. And I think ever since then, and definitely what I do with my Femi athletes, is take that holistic approach and make sure that, if it is a week where you have a lot going on at work, we are going to pull back some of your training, and that's actually going to benefit you as an athlete. It's not actually going to detriment your training. We're not pulling back your training and you're not going to get unfit. It's that we're going to pull back your training, because when you're looking at a training program, you have to take all stresses into account. Training and running is just one stress that we have in our lives. There are so many other stresses. And so prioritizing where you want your stress to come from and what is the most important thing. And if it is your job to, be able to support your family, that's more important than getting out for your long run on a Sunday. So if you need to pull back your training, and you'll get more out of less that week anyway. So I think, it is hard for us athletes, because I know all of us love running, and I know we all love a challenge, and getting those numbers on the board is definitely part of it for a lot of people. But understanding kind of that entire holistic approach, and what is at the end of the day, like, what makes you happy, and how is your health?
I find that concept of pulling your head out of the phone that tells you how many Ks you've done that week and what your average pace was and on every run, and actually just looking at yourself in the mirror. it's a pretty powerful thing. And a little bit of a jump, but I think similarly about environmental activism. It's so easy for us to go from home to work and back again, or to school and back again, without actually looking out the window. Now that we've got all of these digital devices or Zoom calls or whatever, and it's so easy to go about living our lives in this little bubble and forgetting that we're actually on planet Earth and it's changing. And I think we're almost doing that to ourselves sometimes with our training. Like, you go for a run, you come back, you check Strava, you go about the rest of your day, whether that be to work or to school or just looking after the kids. And then if you pull your head out of that and actually look at yourself in the mirror, sometimes you'll find something that's a bit shocking. We've got another question here. What does it mean? What does being ridiculously human mean to both of you?
All right, I'll go first, Lydia, don't worry. I'll help you answer this. Ridiculously human. I think of when someone's like really human, it's when they're really honest and they're really kind of real about how they feel. And I think the word ridiculously is just like, it's probably like unfiltered and what do you call it? An uncrafted way, it's just authentic. That's the word. Thank you, Annika. You can do this for me. But I think, just being really your authentic self, to be ridiculously human is to call a spade a spade. When you're run down, you're run down. When you're injured, you're injured. There's not beating around the bush. And when you're happy, you're happy. You're proud to be. And I think that comes with authenticity. So I think Hillary's just copy and pasted. Authenticity is a collection of choices that we have to make every day. It's about the choice to show up and be real, the choice to be honest, and the choice to let our true selves be seen, by Brene Brown. So I'm going to pretend like I said that, and that's my quote. So Lydia, over to you.
I think I'll leap on from Brene Brown and probably say that
Lucy.
Ridiculously human, I would say, very the same thing, like very honest, very raw, and probably being very vulnerable. I think vulnerability from Brene Brown is definitely something that a lot of people lack. I think ultra marathoners probably have more vulnerability than most people, because who really signs up to 100 miles? And that is, but when you're out there, and I've never run 100 miles, but I can imagine when you're out there and you're by yourself, you are probably at your most vulnerable. And so I feel like vulnerability is just something that a lot of people, probably because of the pressures that everybody is under in this day and age, they have these walls up and they have this idea of success that they have to chase. But without those walls, if we can strip them down and create some more vulnerability in these people, they'll actually be able to find out more about themselves and who they truly are. So I think ridiculously human is, raw, honest vulnerability.
Yeah, awesome. Okay, so sort of start trying to wrap things up a little bit. Who are your role models when it comes to training holistically?
Oh, I'll go first. I would like to say Lydia O'Donnell. No, but seriously, I think, there's a few people, Paige and I were talking about this today, and, a lot of people are posting about who you should follow on International Women's Day, and people that are, like amazing athletes or whatever. And then I said, I think it's also important to think about who you are following and whether they do kind of influence you in the best way, and they do make you feel good, and give you that holistic approach. And I think people like what Lydia is doing, and all the many aspects. She's an athlete. She's an athlete. You're an athlete. You're a coach. You're a human. You give back to the running community with Hunter Athletics. You're doing the Femi thing. There's just so many strings to your bow that you're not defined by your running results. And I think that's the same with, I look at Emily Forsberg, and she's got a kid on the way. She's got little baby May. She's a farmer. She's a mother. She's a sister. And she shows this bubble of like, this is, you know, I'm not just an athlete, my pictures are not just me running. And I think that people that can kind of show that is like, I really worked hard on being like, you know, do I separate my accounts and do I make a food account and a Tani account and a, you know, all these things. And then I was like, no, these are all me, you know, this is under my name, this is my world. And I think that that's kind of like what I really want to focus on, is the people that who I follow, who give me like the best holistic approach, are the ones that, yeah, don't just show me their running and their Strava every day.
Oh, thank you, Lucy. Right back at you. No, but seriously, you definitely inspire me. I think there's a few particular females in my life that I've been so fortunate to stumble across because of running, that have had and will continue to have a huge impact on myself as an athlete and a coach. And I also think a group of women that I think has really inspired me to take a very holistic approach and inspire me daily are my own athletes. I think working and being a coach and working with females over the last 5 years, these females are not only, like I was saying before, they're not only athletes, they are mums, they work full-time jobs, they have so many other things going on in their lives, and they're still able to balance their training and really enjoy it. Whereas, you know, I'm very fortunate to run my own companies and run myself, that I have, you know, I'm very lucky that I have time on my hands, and I can kind of dedicate the hours where I want to dedicate them. Whereas these women are going to work every day. They're looking after their family in the evenings or in the mornings and in the weekends, and they're still able to get out there and train. And what I am constantly talking to them about is making sure that they're feeling okay. And it's not what splits did you hit, it's how did you feel in that session today. And with my relationship with my athletes has really helped me continually assess my own training and my own performance, because you can't be a coach telling some other people to do something and not actually live and breathe it yourself. So I think myself as a coach has really helped myself as an athlete, which is I'm very grateful for.
Yeah, thank you very much, both of you, for that. I think a chat I was having with Lucy a couple of days ago, one thing we were talking about is we are on social media seeing a lot more sort of empowerment of women, and, you know, women supporting women, but sometimes it doesn't always feel like it's coming from a 100% authentic place, and it is a little bit sort of because it's a bit of a trend at the moment. But one thing I've loved about both of you is that, like, you can see, like, there's a tangible outcome from what you guys are doing and what you're promoting. So Lydia, through your coaching and the athletes that are benefiting directly from your coaching and the work you're putting into them, and all of the research you've done and your application of that research, not just actually doing it. And Lucy, through like the conversations that we've had, you've had a huge impact on my own life and my own training in the last 6 months. And you know that, and I've told you that plenty of times, but so that makes a huge difference. So thank you very much both for coming and talking to us all today. Hillary's just going to come in now and help wrap this up too. But yeah, thank you so much for your time. I've loved it. Hillary.
Hello. Hey, Lucy. Hey, Lydia. Hey, Paige. So nice to see you all, and such an awesome conversation. And yeah, I'm really enjoying seeing all the fun stuff happening in the chats. And thank you, Annika. I think you've been along for every session. So legend. Thank you so much. And yeah, just wanted to say a final thank you to all of our guests tonight. We've been absolutely blown away by the caliber of women we've had on, and makes us a bit scared for future years, but we'll just keep making it bigger and better. And yeah, like Lucy said, this shouldn't have to be resigned to a single day a year. And with For Wild Places, we really hope to make it, you know, a conversation that we have more often, and with a broader range of women and men and whoever wants to join in, basically, because, you know, the more conversations about this kind of stuff, the better it is. And yeah, it's really awesome. So thank you everyone for joining us. And these videos will be available online. I'm just uploading them now. So we'll send you out the link. So if you weren't able to come to anything, you can catch up. And we might make another version so people can just watch the online only. So if you know someone that wasn't able to make it today and would benefit from this, you can pass it on to them. Because it was kind of, we wanted to, remunerate the women for their time, but at the same time, the more people that can see this, the better. So we're trying to find that balance of, putting stuff out there, but also valuing it and valuing the people's time for coming on board. So well done, Paige. You've done an awesome job. I kind of roped Paige and Mariella into this. They kind of didn't give a choice to say no, but they've both done an awesome job. So it's been so good to have everyone on board, and so nice to see Paige and Lucy in the same place.
We just had dinner together and we've been to the beach and for a hike. So it's been a good day.
Oh, good. So navigating the technology of Zoom together.
Yeah. Gosh.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much, everyone. And we'll be in touch by email soon. And happy International Women's Day.
Woo. Bye, Lids. Bye, everyone.
Thanks, everyone, for coming.
See ya.